Lawrence Fox on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Very good morning. Welcome to Bev Turner Today on GB News. Now, the final 3 episodes of Netflix docu-series Harry and Meghan was released this morning at 8 a.m. Buckingham Palace has been accused of conducting a real kind of war against Meghan by the Duchess's lawyer. We're going to be discussing a judge ruling also this morning about 5 care home workers who lost their jobs after refusing to have the COVID jab. They say that they were fairly sacked. I'm going to talk to a lawyer about that. And I'm going to be joined by fantastic guests this morning. We've got Joanna Williams and David Stark here. We're going to get it stuck into the nurses striking for the first time in 100 years. That's all coming up after a look at the latest news.
Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Tens of thousands of nurses across parts of the UK are taking part in the biggest strike in NHS history. Picket lines have been set up in England, Wales and Northern Ireland in the first of 2 12-hour strikes over pay. Staff will continue to provide some urgent care, but routine surgery and other planned treatment will be disrupted. Members of the Royal College of Nursing are asking for a 19% pay rise, a demand the government says is unaffordable. Under-Secretary for Health and Social Care, Maria Caulfield, explains.
We have got a difficult choice as a government. The RCN are asking for a 19% pay rise. That's £10 billion of funding that we would have to find to be able to pay for that. And as a government, we've only got 3 mechanisms to do that. It's not the government's money, it's the taxpayers' money. And we would either have to borrow to pay for that. We either then tax people, and I think no one would want that at a time when people are already struggling with cost of living pressures, or we take it from existing services.
Well, ICU nurse Kelly Hopkins says they're striking not just for pay, but for their patients.
Patients aren't safe, patients aren't getting the care. At the moment, there's 2 nurses on a ward that cannot deliver that care. We're going into hospital. I came into nursing to look after my patients, to hold their hands, to look after them, to wash them, to brush their teeth when they're unable to do that. And I can't do that at the moment because there's not enough staff on the ward.
Authorities are continuing their search for 4 migrants believed to be missing after a boat partially deflated in the English Channel. 4 people have died when a boat with 47 on board capsized off the Kent coast yesterday morning. Well, our Home and Security editor Mark White is in Dover for us. Mark, what more can you tell us?
Well, it is a very low-key search operation because clearly it's more of a recovery effort, as there's no way that anyone will have been able to survive in the freezing waters of the English Channel for this length of time. And of course, those in the water will have been swept well away from the initial scene of this tragedy in the early hours of yesterday morning because of the tide conditions and the currents in the English Channel as well. So a low-key search operation. As far as migrant crossings are concerned, none so far today. The weather's not really conducive for that. In fact, for the next couple of days, it's going to be poor weather conditions again. But we're told that come Saturday, it should be calm enough again for there to be another surge of migrant crossings in the English Channel. We're expecting hundreds more to attempt to make that voyage.
Mark, thank you. Mark White, our Home and Security editor there for us in Dover. The final episodes of the Harry and Meghan docu-series have been released on Netflix, with the Duchess of Sussex revealing she thought about taking her own life. Meghan says she thought to herself, all of this will stop if I'm not here. Meanwhile, Prince Harry describes what he calls an urgent meeting with senior royals to discuss a new role for them as a couple. He recalls it being terrifying to have his brother shout at him and his father say things he claims that aren't true. The palace hasn't yet commented on the series.
I would far rather get destroyed in the press than play along with this game or this business of trading. And to see my brother's office copy the very same thing that we promised the 2 of us would never ever do, that was heartbreaking.
And the Bank of England is expected to raise interest rates again as the cost of living continues to soar. The benchmark rate stands at 3%, with economists predicting it could go up to 3.5%. The latest meeting of the Monetary Policy Committee today will mark the 9th consecutive hike since last December, with the rate already at its highest level in 14 years. Some security rules on carrying liquids and items such as laptops in airport hand luggage are to ease. The government set a deadline for June 2024 for major UK airports to install new security technology. That'll allow passengers to carry up to 2 litres of liquid in their hand luggage. That's up from the current 100 mils. And there'll be no need to remove electrical items from bags at security. Welcome news for many, I'm sure. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Bev.
Very good morning. Welcome to Bev Turner today on GB News. Thank you for joining me. Stay here for the next 2 hours, won't you? More royal drama today, as the final 3 episodes of the docuseries Harry and Meghan have just been released on Netflix. We've got a wide range of royal experts on hand to break down the key points of the show and consider what it might mean for the royal family. A tribunal rules that care home workers can be sacked for refusing to get a vaccine. Barchester Healthcare dismissed 5 workers who wouldn't get the jab, but a judge threw out the claims of unfair dismissal on the grounds that the care home was trying to protect clinically vulnerable patients. This is extremely controversial. I'll be discussing how significant this ruling is with a lawyer. And nurses in England, Wales and Northern Ireland have begun the first of 2 day-long strikes over pay. The Royal College of Nurses wants a 19% pay rise that the government say is simply unaffordable. So let me know what you think about all of that. GBViews at gbnews.uk. We've also got a Twitter poll running. I want to ask whether you do support the nurses' strike. 73% of you so far this morning are not supporting the industrial action. GBViews at gbnews.uk is the email that I will be checking throughout the show. Very dramatic. Now, part 2 of Harry and Meghan's documentary series has officially dropped, as the kids say, on Netflix. The 4th episode of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's series opens with clips from the weddings of the late Queen and Duke of Edinburgh, and now a King and Diana, Princess of Wales. But what else does the 3-hour extravaganza have in store for everyone? Let's go live to the GB News Royal Reaction Room. Oh yeah, we have one, to speak to our royal reporter, Cameron Walker, who is busy watching the episodes. Cameron, you probably have more popcorn than me, but I am gripped on the edge of my seat. What have we seen so far this morning?
Bev, it's pretty clear that these final 3 episodes are a lot more explosive than the first 3 we saw last week. Not only is Prince Harry and Meghan very much criticising the British press here, they have started to criticise and make allegations against senior courtiers within Buckingham Palace. And to be frank, may go as far as to criticising Prince Harry's brother, Prince William, himself. But before we get on to that, if you remember way back in, I think it was 2019 or early 2020, when Harry and Meghan had decided to step back as senior working members of the royal family, there was a big meeting at Sandringham, dubbed the Sandringham Summit, between Prince Harry, the Queen, Prince Charles and Prince William. And this is what Prince Harry said about his experience of that summit.
I chose option 3 in the meeting, half in, half out, have our own jobs, but also work in support of the Queen. But it became very clear very quickly that that goal was not up for discussion or debate. It was terrifying to have my brother scream and shout at me, and my father say things that just simply weren't true, and my grandmother, quietly sit there and sort of take it all in.
Well, I'm joined by royal historian Rafe Hadel-Mancu in the GB News Royal Reaction Room. Rafe, pretty serious stuff there from Prince Harry. He is saying that his brother shouted and screamed at him during that summit, and his father, now the king, said things which simply weren't true. Your thoughts?
Well, yes, as you say, these are far more explosive allegations now than we saw in the first 3 episodes. And of course, it depends entirely, I suppose, upon which side of the argument you're on. We know how heated, we know how stressed and how tense things were at the time of that Sandringham meeting. So I'm certainly not surprised that emotions would have been at a peak. Whose side do you believe? What, if there was screaming or shouting, was it actually bullying? We've had this allegation, of course, that Prince William bullied Meghan and Harry out of the royal family. One person's bullying might be just someone else saying toe the family line, after all.
Yeah, well, on that bullying line, that was very much alluded to in this documentary, and Prince Harry actually talked about that particular story which appeared in the British press, and that joint statement between his brother and William and Harry at the time wasn't all as it seems. Take a look.
A sign of public unity from the brothers, who issued a joint statement calling the report false, offensive, and potentially harmful.
I couldn't believe it. No one had asked me. No one had asked me permission to put my name to a statement like that. And I rang Em and I told her, and she burst into floods of tears, because within 4 hours they were happy to lie to protect my brother. And yet, for 3 years, they were never willing to tell the truth to protect us.
Some pretty serious allegations there from Prince Harry against his brother, or at least his brother's team, which we do not have a response for. I just want to add there. But Rafe, do you think Prince Harry is very much saying there, he's not denying the fact that story is untrue, is he, about Prince William bullying Harry and Meghan out of the royal family?
I think the implication is clear here. I asked earlier on to see some evidence, and at least now we are getting some evidence cited, and I think it now behooves Kensington Palace to actually respond to these allegations as to why the statement was put out if Prince Harry wasn't privy to that statement. But certainly, you know, it has to be said. Also, Prince Harry said that the royal family and the media are partners. But how on earth did the media get this story about William allegedly bullying Harry and Meghan? What was the source for that? Does it seem like Harry was briefing against his own brother on this story as well? I think that needs to be addressed. But also, if the royal family was briefing against the Sussexes, and we've heard about bullying, why did the royal family suppress the very damaging report into Meghan's alleged bullying members of her own staff?
Yeah, I mean, it's clear there's two sides to this story, and we're only getting one side from this documentary, aren't we? We haven't had an official response from Buckingham Palace or Kensington Palace. But, Rafe, something I wanted to touch on is the online trolling which Harry and Meghan talk about, and the very, very damaging and horrible comments which Meghan has got online, some of which are telling her to kill herself, or they are threatening to kill her. And Meghan speaks very emotionally about that time and seems to make a direct comparison between negative headlines about her in the British press and those online trolls threatening to take her life.
Well, look, trolling is a terrible thing to go through, and no one wants to be on the receiving end of that. But actually, this is a question of whether you're a glass half full or a glass half empty person. To have only 83 accounts causing 70% of these harsh negative stories out of a population of 70 million in this country, let alone the hundreds of millions in the English-speaking world, I think is a testament to the fact that there are so few racists in this country. 83 people out of such a large population, I think, is something to actually celebrate, that it isn't a far larger number. And yet, you know, we all have to go through this. On a very minor scale, I receive trolling all the time. You just have to ignore it. You have to expect that, and it comes along with the role. But of course, what we've seen from Meghan's side is an attempt to portray her as, we've heard the words here, symbols of social justice that need to be taken down. And I think it's time to move on from that.
Right, for the moment, thank you very much. Clearly, there are two sides to every story. We have not had a response from Buckingham Palace or Kensington Palace. If we do get one, I'll bring that straight to you.
Thank you, Cameron. Thank you ever so much. Cameron will be watching more Netflix for us and letting us know what transpires as we go through to midday this morning. I don't have an awful lot of sympathy with her talking about the online trolling. What does she expect? Everybody gets abuse online if you're on the telly. I get plenty of it every morning, Monday to Thursday. You just have to ignore it. Let's speak to Emma Pryor, senior writer for the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People. Emma, good morning. Thank you for joining me. Right, what have you seen so far? What do you make of it? What are the headline takeouts for you?
Yeah, morning, Bev. I mean, as has been said already, this is by far the most emotive of the episodes. I've watched 4 and 5 so far, because this is really the demise of the fairy tale. It starts off with the sort of the perfect princess wedding, and then you see the fallout from that. You see, Meghan battling with her mental health. Now, we already know just how bad things got for Meghan from the Oprah interview. So it's not, in that sense, massively revelatory, but you obviously hear it in far more depth. And, I think some viewers of this will, their hearts will go out to Meghan. And there's a sense the whole way through this second volume, there's a sense that they're like puppets on a string, being told what to do by the institution, and they're simply not going to take that. As I say, sort of part of you admires them and part of you thinks, well, they're very privileged. They're getting an absolute packet for this Netflix series. And they've said it all before. So do they really need to dissect it to this level? But yeah, I mean, having said that, there are, they have a chance here to go into a lot more depth.
Yeah.
I mean, they
Emma,
describe themselves as the Royal Support Act.
I had a very low opinion of them before I watched the first 3 episodes. And in terms of being a PR exercise to make us think differently about them, it worked, right? I came away going, oh, fair enough. Maybe they did just, they were too modern for the royal family. They weren't posh enough for the royal family, is what I felt like. They weren't going to just buy into these slightly illogical rituals and stuff that the royal family has to do, right? I have a feeling I'm going to feel differently after these next 3 episodes when they really do start to... Is it becoming a pity party now? Are they now starting to feel more sorry for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that you kind of... Obviously, Netflix have made the most of this with 6 episodes. I do feel that you could probably condense this, but obviously, why would they when they get, royals speaking for the first time or former royals? But yeah, I do think you get this insight into their life that is quite endearing in some senses and it's sort of sickly sweet in others. I mean, in terms of sickly sweet, she talks about when she was pregnant, they were journaling and writing to their their child as she was sort of pregnant, sort of calling saying, dear baby, this is what's happened today, which, some people might find a bit naff. Some people might find really sweet. And at the end of the day, it's up to them what they do. There's also when they move in after they're married to Nottingham Cottage in Kensington Palace, she and Harry talk about being quite small. Again, fair enough if that's their view, but a lot of people won't sort of particularly warm to that. They're still living in palace grounds at the end of the day. But it's quite poignant when you hear from Meghan's mother talking about how, Meghan had told her that she had thought about suicide. You can see, there's a part in that episode 4 where Meghan's mother is, practically in tears, as you'd expect from a mother. And ultimately, she's wanting to protect her daughter. And there's also a sense from Harry that when they really needed that mental health support, that there was just a sort of, we can't help you. You have to get on with it because what would it look like? And he says some sad stuff about, his own family. He says, when you would expect support from your own, you've got the opposite. So I actually feel... Oh, I mean... There's an empathy.
Yeah, the thing is, Emma, I kind of think, you know what? If you really wanted a psychologist, you could probably find one. You didn't need the royals to kind of tap into their contacts book. It's not like they were particularly tapped in. They're very much of the buck up, keep calm and carry on school. Anyway, lots more to unravel. Emma Pryor, thank you so much, senior writer for the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People. Gear change from rich people to those who can barely make ends meet. Nurses are striking today, of course. We're doing this in our Twitter poll. We are asking you, do you support the nurses' strike? So far today, 73% of you do not support the nurses' strike. Please give me your reasons why under that, won't you? I will get to as many of them as I can. And also send me your emails, gbviews@gbnews.uk. After the break, I'm going to be joined by academic, author and fantastic talker Joanna Williams, and also the peerless historian, especially on a day when we're talking about royals, David Starkey. See you in a few minutes.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
my name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good morning, it's 10:23. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. My guests are here this morning. I'm delighted to be joined by author and academic Joanna Williams, who amazingly made it here on the train from the middle of nowhere, and historian David Starkey. Thank you so much for coming in. Right, let me see what you've been saying as well. We're going to talk about Meghan and Harry. I know you haven't watched it so far this morning. Our viewers, Brian has said Harry is toast. Carol has said there are 3 people in their marriage, Harry, Meghan and the cameraman. It is doomed to fail. And Angie said the way Harry talks, it's as though he's been persuaded accusations are true rather than knowing them for himself. I thought this a bit, Angie. If half of them were true, why didn't he do something about them at the time? I predict Meghan has laid the groundwork to star in her own movie. David Starkey, let me come to you. You've watched Royals for many, many years. We've never seen anything like this, have we?
Well, we sort of did with Princess Diana.
Oh, I guess so.
It really is true. You know, the Bashir interview, the famous one, which poor Prince William wants us to believe was extorted from this poor woman. She wanted to do it. Well, she wanted to damage.
But they lied to her. Well, OK, in either direction, she's cast as the victim, isn't she? The idea is that she wants to
what I'm trying to say is we have seen this before. We've also seen you cited one of them, or a viewer did, those strange, heavily scripted phrases in the Bashir interview. You know, there were 3 of us in this marriage. I always used to say that my Labrador took all of his tricks from watching Princess Diana. On one occasion, I saw him applying mascara. You know. and I think, again, look at the artificiality of the language of this thing. It's presented as though this is from the heart. It's manifestly scripted. I wasn't thrown to the wolves. I was fed to the wolves. Now, what on earth, when you think about it, when you try and actually analyse that sentence, does it mean anything at all?
No, but I think it's... Do you want...
Am I being cruel? Come on, tell me.
No, I don't think...
I'm being cruel and horrible, David Stark.
No, I love it. But you see, the thing is, Jo, and I'm thinking about it, when she's saying, you know, I wasn't, I was fed to the wolves, kind of young people talk a bit like that, like, you know, especially young American actresses. Yeah. There is a blurred line, isn't there, between fact and fiction sometimes in life anyway for these.
No, well, this is true. And to me, I think there are a couple of differences between this and what was going on with Princess Diana. I mean, for one thing, Harry is an insider, whereas Diana was always a little bit on the outside. She married into the royal family, whereas for Harry...
She was a good deal more distinguished in birth than the royal family, if you actually look at the House of Spencer.
Yeah.
But for Harry, who's been brought up in this institution, he's talking about his grandmother. He's throwing accusations around now about his brother, referring to his brother in this latest episode just released today as having been shouting and screaming at him. Now, I'm the eldest of 5 children. You know, I have lots of siblings. I have 3 children myself. That is what siblings do.
Yeah, I was quite... I found that quite refreshing. Well, I was quite glad they were actually slugging it out in Sandringham.
In private.
Rather than all being buttoned up and not really talking about it. I quite like the idea they got it out in the open.
Absolutely, but it should now be behind closed doors. You know, if what I said to my siblings, if what my children said to each other was made public, I'd be heartbroken because the fact is, with siblings, you know, you can shout, you can scream, and then you go and you have a drink and you kiss and you make up and everybody's forgotten all about it the next day. Whereas Harry's clearly carried this grievance with him and is now making it completely open. And again, whereas Diana was slightly pushing at the boundaries of what was socially acceptable, acceptable at the time. I think you're absolutely right, Bev. You know, when Harry and Meghan do this, they are completely in line with that kind of emotive, let it all hang out, do your dirty washing in public.
Yeah.
You know, they're kind of the time.
Just one more question on this, David, before we move on to talk about real people and striking nurses. Do you think that the palace will now make a statement? Will they have to say something, or will they still maintain what they've done forever, which is no comment, no comment?
I think the issue is whether what is said about the behaviour of Prince William really does amount to a serious charge. And I haven't listened to it sufficiently carefully to know whether that's the case. If it really is direct accusation of lying, I think they should probably answer it. Whether
Given
they
that
will. But you see, I think
the king in waiting,
we missed the most fundamental point. Harry, you were saying, Joan, is absolutely, of course, born into it. But he seems never to have understood it. The key complaint is this was a hierarchical institution. What on earth does he think monarchy is?
This is what
But it is this burning resentment that I'm the younger brother and I'm not treated as though I was the Prince of Wales. I am merely Duke of Sussex. It's Meghan. I am merely Duchess of Sussex. I'm not treated as though I were Princess of Wales. What on earth do they think it's about?
It's that kind of old-fashioned fictional trope of the stranger in the strange land, isn't it? That's how they both talk. And they think, you didn't arrive there by rocket ship. I mean, I know to some extent Meghan did, but Harry didn't.
No.
Totally not. But equally, I think when you actually look, I mean, can we all just cast our minds back to Meghan's wedding? Can we look at the Prince of Wales as he then was, the king that he now is? She says how gracious, charming. He deliberately stands in for her own father, totally against precedent.
Yeah, and royal protocol.
The way in which the entire service is reconstructed to reflect her heritage and all the rest of it. Every single thing that was done, that was possible to be done to welcome her, happened.
Yeah.
And this has simply been thrown back, and with contempt and with interest. But I think your point is absolutely right. These are people who are celebrities. Harry began as a royal. He's turned into a celebrity. And celebrity is all about, as it were, putting the dirtiest aspects of your character in public. It's this terrible thing in which people literally turn themselves inside out.
It's celebrity victimhood.
It is awful.
But what is so strange coming from Harry and Meghan is it's this really awful mix of celebrity victimhood combined with a massive dose of self-entitlement and privilege. So for somebody to sit there and portray themselves as victims on top of this self-entitlement...
For a royal duke, I mean, can we just pause? For a royal duke and duchess, he, having inherited half Diana's very considerable wealth, she sporting magnificent jewellery that was Diana's, sitting in a mansion in Montecito to complain about being oppressed.
Yes.
There's a level of self-indulgence.
You know what occurred to me as well, of course, that Harry was largely left to live a normal life, OK, compared to William, and he did 10 years in the army. And he said in the first few episodes, you know, having that time in the army, I hung out with normal people. I was treated normally. I wasn't treated like a royal. And that's kind of backfired now on the family because, as you say, he doesn't buy into some of these illogical and irrational, because they don't bear scrutiny, the idea that when your grandmother walks in the room, you have to bow. Like, it is illogical in 2022, but it works.
But life isn't logic.
Yes,
so come on.
That life certainly isn't.
I never expected to hear a silly notion. We don't live by logic. We live by habits, by traditions, by family traditions, and the royal family has its own odd little traditions.
It does, and I think the thing that Harry doesn't seem to understand, has never understood, and this goes back to your earlier point, David, when you're talking about hierarchy, is there's an implicit contract there that, yes, you will behave like this to your grandmother, and yes, you will have your photo taken once in a while for public consumption, but the other side of that bargain is you will have this lovely house, you will have this very privileged, nice lifestyle.
And do you know what? If they were my mates, do you know what I'd have said to them? What do you want? What do you want this? What is this going to look like? You can try to put your side of the story out to the public, but what bridges are you going to burn in the act of doing so? And is it going to be worth it in the fullness of time? You love each other. You live in a fabulous house, have a wonderful life, and just button it. Anyway, time for a quick break. Thank you, guys. We're going to come on to nurses in a moment. An employment tribunal has ruled that care home bosses were within their rights to sack members of staff who refused to be vaccinated against COVID. How significant is this? I'm going to be talking about that after your news with Rhiannon.
Bev, thank you. It's 10:32. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. Tens of thousands of nurses across parts of the UK are taking part in the biggest strike in NHS history. Picket lines have been set up in England, Wales and Northern Ireland in the first of two 12-hour strikes over pay. Staff will continue to provide some urgent care, but routine surgery and other planned treatment will be disrupted. Members of the Royal College of Nursing are asking for a 19% pay rise, a demand the government says is unaffordable. Authorities are continuing their search for 4 migrants believed to be missing after a boat partially deflated in the English Channel. 4 others died when a boat with 47 on board capsized off the Kent coast yesterday morning. British authorities and lifeboat services, as well as the French Navy, were all involved in the rescue operation. The final episodes of the Harry and Meghan docu-series have been released on Netflix, with the Duchess of Sussex revealing she thought about taking her own life. Prince Harry blames the media for Meghan suffering a miscarriage and speaks about the breakdown of his relationship with his brother. He recalls it being terrifying to have Prince William shout at him and his father say things he claims that weren't true. The palace hasn't yet commented on the series. And some security rules on carrying liquids and items such as laptops in airport hand luggage are to ease. The government set a deadline for June 2024 for major UK airports to install new security technology. It'll allow passengers to carry up to 2 litres of liquid in their hand luggage. That's up from the current 100 mils. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2337 and €1.1617. The price of gold is £1,440.76 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 sat 7,445 points.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
As a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride. Oh, she's on it today! Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Bev Turner today on GB News. Thank you for joining me. Now, an employment tribunal has ruled that care home bosses were within their rights to sack members of staff who refused to take the COVID jabs. Back during the time where care workers were made to get the vaccine, Barchester Healthcare, one of Britain's biggest care providers, sacked 5 members of staff refusing to take the jab without any medical exemption. The employment judge threw out claims of unfair dismissal, saying that the home had fired the unvaccinated staff in order to protect clinically vulnerable lives. So I'm joined now by Stephen Jackson from Jackson Osborne Employment Lawyers. Good morning, Stephen. Just explain, if you would, the kind of the background to this story. We've got 5 individuals. How did this all come about in the first place? It's been a very difficult time for care home workers.
Yeah, I've seen a few comments on this story, but we have to take ourselves back to 2021. That is the time that the tribunal is looking at as to what was happening and was the employer acting reasonably in how it was responding to the situation it faced then, what it knew then, not what is known now. And that's the important point for people to grasp. So what was the situation? The situation was that back in, I think it was April 2021, the government finally started the consultation on bringing in a requirement for workers in care homes to be jabbed with this COVID-19 vaccine, as called. That was April 2021 when the consultation started, but there had been a long lead up to that, of course. So we'd been told throughout 2020 that the vaccine was the way out and the safest, most safe and effective way to protect all of us, and in particular, to protect the most vulnerable in the care homes. So that was what the pervading narrative was at the time, and the belief held reasonably, many would say, by many people, including Barchester. So when we got to, between about November and April, Barchester proceeded with rolling out a policy whereby they were requiring all of their staff to be vaccinated with these mRNA COVID-19 injections. That's where they were. Now, most of the Barchester workers, they went along, they rolled up their sleeves and got jabbed accordingly. But many said, actually, I don't want to, but they went along with it because they knew the writing was on the wall, as the tribunal wrote, and they were going to lose their jobs if they didn't. Many had their bonuses withheld. They were told, well, if you don't do the right thing, then you're not one of us, frankly, and you don't deserve a bonus. So by the time we got to April or so in 2021, nearly all of the Barchester workers, they're about 5-6% outstanding, had rolled up their sleeves. But there were some who said, actually, no, this is going too far. I don't accept this is safe and effective, or I simply, it's against my beliefs. Such as a belief that, as one put it, God has given me natural immunity and I'm entitled to rely on that, and I don't think I should be having anything which is unnatural put into me. It wasn't quite put that way, but that's essentially what was put there. And that's where they were, and they held out and they were dismissed. So the tribunal's question was that dismissal fair and was it discriminatory? Are you with me so far, Bev?
I am. That's brilliantly explained. Carry on.
Okay. So we get to the tribunal this year, eventually, so a long time to come through. The question of the tribunal, as I started at the start, is not what do we now know? Were these vaccines, as called, safe and effective? Were they what they were described, what's said in the tin, etc.? That's not the question for the tribunal now. The question is what was known, and for dismissal at least, what was known at the time in April through June 2021 when Barchester was saying, well, push has come to shove, and we're shoving you out the door. What the tribunal said was essentially, and what Barchester said was, well, what we knew, what we believed was that these were safe and effective, and that there was no significant risk to our workers by having these injections. The tribunal said that belief was reasonable. The tribunal specifically has not ruled on whether or not it was correct. The tribunal was very clean, and I've made a note exactly what they said. The tribunal was clear from the outset that its role was not to assess the dangers of COVID, nor the effectiveness or safety of any COVID-19 vaccine. So they specifically have not looked at the evidence to say these injections were safe or they were effective. The question for unfair dismissal is simply, was the employer's decision, their belief and how they acted in response to that, was it reasonable? Or alternatively, if they were to say it wasn't fair, wasn't reasonable, they would have to say no employer could reasonably believe these vaccines were safe and effective and were going to protect the residents of the care homes. That's always going to be a difficult task when you've got, as Barchester relied on, the government and the government scientific advisors saying these are safe and they are effective. So to say no reasonable employer could accept that as being true was always going to be difficult. So that's where we are.
Do these employees or former employees, do they have any means of appealing this now? I know that the Together Declaration guys have got a campaign running with compensate and reinstate healthcare workers. Is there any likelihood of that happening? And if so, who would have to make that decision? That sounds like a government-level intervention.
For the Together campaign, that certainly is. As far as appealing this decision, I think there are certainly some prospects of it. And I think watch this space is the answer, because I've just explained how the unfair dismissal situation works, and that's a difficult task. But discrimination, that's another one. The tribunal accepted that what was referred to in very pithily as my body, my choice, being a philosophical belief of these workers, it was accepted by Barchester and the tribunal that this was a protected philosophical belief. But the difficulty is the tribunal does not seem, as far as I can see, to have identified what was the justification for interfering with that belief and the rights. So as you say, my belief is my body, my choice. Therefore, I'm entitled to reject you injecting this into my arm. Excuse me. To justify the interference, to justify saying no, you will lose your job if you don't have this injection. The tribunal didn't actually call it coercion, but that's exactly what it is. It can't be anything else. It must be justified. And the tribunal, as I said, they have said we are not looking at what is the. We're not going to assess the danger of COVID, nor effectiveness or safety of any COVID-19 vaccine. Yeah. Well, how can you justify interference with the rights if you don't make an assessment of sorts? They must have made some assessment. Barchester did. These are safe and effective. The tribunal accepted that as a reasonable one. So there's been some assessment. But actually, at the time, there were numerous studies indicating these were not effective. So the whole purpose was to protect, quite rightly, protect the vulnerable, the residents.
Yeah.
But were they effective in that? Well, there were all these studies showing that, and showing that the viral load for vaccinated, unvaccinated was pretty much the same. There was no benefit from the vaccination.
We're going to speak to a care home owner in just a moment as well, but thank you. It's a really complicated issue. It sounds very simple on paper, so I really appreciate you giving us the time to explain it. Stephen Jackson there from Jackson Osborne Employment Lawyers. Now, Joyce Pinfield is a spokeswoman at the National Care Association. Good morning, Joyce. If you could just, thank you for hanging on. It is a really complicated issue, this, isn't it? Because it ties in all sorts of different issues about medical ethics, about bodily autonomy, about what is right for the vulnerable and the elderly in these care homes as well. How hard was it to be a care worker during the pandemic with these diverse pressures from all sorts of areas?
Yes, good morning. Of course, we do have to go back to the beginning of COVID, when we were all not knowing quite what was going to happen. We were all very worried regarding protecting the NHS. So, of course, the government did leave us to our own devices almost. They wanted to protect the NHS, so they did send people to care homes without testing. So many people were unfortunately open to the COVID virus, and many residents and Indian staff were lost due to that virus at the beginning of, what was it, about 18 months ago. And so we were calling as care home providers that we needed protection, that we needed PPE, we needed only people to come into care homes who had been tested, so that we would not be bringing that virus into the care homes.
Joyce,
so
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I just want to get your thoughts on this ruling, because I think there were about 40,000 care workers who were lost from the system because of these mandates. Young people who just said, I've had COVID, I don't want to have this injection. What do you think about this tribunal ruling to say that they were fairly dismissed now?
Well, of course, it was the government legislation that said that we did have to vaccinate all of our staff. So in many ways, we had no option. Many of our staff felt that this was really a very hard thing to put on care workers who were already stressed at that time. So care providers almost had no option to enforce the mandatory vaccination of all care home staff. And I think this is where we came from, is that we did need a way of protecting our residents. Of course, we have a duty of care. But because of that mandatory vaccination programme that was put on us by the government, we almost had no option. We could perhaps have managed by coercion to explain to people that this was the best way to protect our residents, to protect yourselves and your families. But we weren't given that option to try and persuade people. So unfortunately, this is why many people lost their jobs.
OK, thank you very much, Joyce. Joyce Pinfield there, spokeswoman at the National Care Association. And of course, it was the loss of those workers which has contributed to the pressure now within the NHS with people that can't be discharged, elderly people that can't be discharged into care homes, and therefore the nurses are working harder, and therefore we have the strikes. You can follow this all back, can't you? Now, of course, yesterday, 4 people died after the migrant boat capsized in the English Channel. It is the worst tragedy in that part of the water for over a year. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, is here to bring us up to date.
Just 13 months after 27 migrants drowned in the English Channel, another tragedy unfolding offshore. The sound of helicopters filling the night sky as Coast Guard and air ambulance assets scrambled to the scene. There were dozens of people in the water after their small migrant boat got into difficulties. Lifeboats, Border Force and Royal Navy vessels, along with their French counterparts, converged on an area about 8 miles off the Kent coast. Back in Dover, ambulances were on standby in the harbour to receive the casualties. As the morning progressed, the worst possible news, with the confirmation of multiple fatalities. Their bodies brought back to shore as the Home Secretary addressed Parliament on another Channel tragedy authorities had long warned about.
These are the days that we dread. Crossing the Channel in unseaworthy vessels is a lethally dangerous endeavour. It is for this reason, above all, that we are working so hard to destroy the business model of the people smugglers, evil, organised criminals who treat human beings as cargo.
Even as the massive air and sea search operation continued, UK and French authorities had to respond to several other small boat sightings, picking up and transferring hundreds of migrants to Dover as the criminal gangs took full advantage of calmer weather conditions in the Channel.
The brutal truth as well is that criminal gangs have made money
from those lives that were lost today. They have profited as people have drowned. Day after day, week after week, criminal gangs are putting lives at risk for money.
This latest tragedy came less than a day after the Prime Minister announced a new multi-pronged plan he hoped would help reduce the number of small boat crossings. Although the authorities in France and the UK have long warned about the dangers of trying to negotiate the English Channel in a flimsy small inflatable, there is no end to the number of people who seem to be willing to take that risk. And as far as the criminal gangs are concerned, well, they're not going to stop what is a lucrative multi-million-pound criminal enterprise. Even in these winter months, the Channel migrants will keep coming. Whenever the criminal gangs see a weather window, they'll launch en masse from French beaches. And sadly, individual tragedies will do nothing to deter them.
Thank you, Mark. Mark White there. Now, let me reintroduce you to my guest this morning. I'm delighted to be joined by author and academic Joanna Williams, and author of fantastic Substack, by the way, where you publish your own articles. Yours is brilliant, Jo. I subscribe. And historian David Starkey. Good morning. Right. Nurses striking. We've got 100,000 striking nurses. This is unprecedented. They say that they're striking not just about pay. They want a 19% pay rise. That seems like quite a lot. And but they've also said they're striking about patient safety. They say that their numbers are so thin on the ground that they are putting patients at risk. What do you think, David?
I think the really interesting, historian David Starkey, right. I think the interesting thing is to look at the history of the Royal College of Nurses. A name like that, this was not and was never intended to be a trade union. It's founded in the middle of the First World War, 1916. The intention is to turn nursing into a serious profession. That's why it's called the college.
See, I think everyone knows you're a historian, David. Everyone knows who you are.
But what I'm just trying to press is that what we've seen is an organisation that's turned its back on its history. The Royal College embodied the notion that nursing was a vocation and that your absolute duty was to your patient and not to yourself. There's been a coup in the organisation in the last few years with the emergence of Pat Cullen as the General Secretary, and that has represented standing the entire tradition of nursing on its head.
What an interesting take. What do you think, Joanna? So the conclusion is we're all too selfish now to have any sort of occupation in which you put you abnegate your own needs for the sake of the person that you're caring for.
Well, I do generally think that there is some truth in that, but I think ultimately if you don't have a decent wage, then you're not able to do your job properly either.
No, I would agree with that, but what I'm trying to say is it's how you go about getting it. And remember, a pay review body has come up with what is relatively a very large settlement. We are in the middle of the most serious financial crisis since the Second World War, and these people, you uttered the figure, 19%.
I mean, I agree that figure does seem eye-watering, but we've got to remember that inflation is above 10%, so you need a pay rise of 10% just to stay still. Now, I feel bad about nurses asking for this amount of money because it seems to me that huge amounts of our money, taxpayers' money, my money, is going into the NHS, but that doesn't necessarily correspond to nurses' salaries. I mean, I wonder how much of that money that goes into the NHS is going to managers, to bureaucrats, to equality and diversity officers, to people who are not actually on the front line. And I actually don't think nurses are that well paid in the grand scheme of things. And whereas those managers and bureaucrats and equality and diversity officers were able to work from home during lockdown, it was nurses who were actually out there on the wards. GPs might not have been. GPs stayed at home and saw you through Zoom, but it was the nurses who were out on the front line. And I actually think they do deserve a pay rise.
Let's look at some of the numbers then properly. So real pay for nurses has declined by £5,000 since 2010, fallen by £1,800 this year alone. 40,000 nurses left the NHS in the past year. That's 1 in 9 of the workforce. What should the government do now, David? What does Steve Barclay do now? Because they're not going to. It's not going to go away.
They're not going to go away, and they mustn't go away for obvious reasons. What Steve Barclay is doing is something very remarkable. He is the first minister to begin to grasp the problem that faces this country. Nobody's noticed it. It's fascinating. It's about place. He has brought remember, politicians in theory have no control over the NHS at all, apart from setting its budget. It's deranged. It's run as a kind of quango.
Yeah.
And what he has insisted is that the heads of that quango
all work together in one office.
All come into his office and work with him. For the first time, there's a sign of somebody actually grasping the fundamental problem, which is and again, let's put this into perspective. The NHS is starting to take over Britain. If you actually look at government expenditure, it's 40% and rising. If it continues at its current trajectory, the NHS will be over 50%.
And if we continue at our current trajectory, the newsreader is going to be very cross with me. So I hate to interrupt you, David Starkey, but that is the end of our first hour. We'll be right back with more after this short break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Very good morning. Welcome to Bev Turner today on GB News. Thank you for joining me. Nurses in England, Wales and Northern Ireland will stage walkouts this morning in the largest strike action in NHS history. Migrants are still fighting for their lives in hospital, and 4 have died after a migrant boat capsized in the England Channel yesterday. And the second part of Harry and Meghan's Look at Us Netflix series has become available to view this morning. What have they said now? That's all coming up after a look at the latest news.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 11. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Tens of thousands of nurses across parts of the UK are taking part in the biggest strike in NHS history. Picket lines have been set up in England, Wales and Northern Ireland in the first of two 12-hour strikes over pay. Staff will continue to provide some urgent care, but routine surgery and other planned treatment will be disrupted. Members of the Royal College of Nursing are asking for a 19% pay rise, a demand the government says is unaffordable. Under-Secretary for Health and Social Care, Maria Caulfield, explains.
We have got a difficult choice as a government. The RCN are asking for a 19% pay rise. That's £10 billion of funding that we would have to find to be able to pay for that. And as a government, we've only got three mechanisms to do that. It's not the government's money, it's the taxpayers' money. And we would either have to borrow to pay for that. We either then tax people, and I think no one would want that at a time when people are already struggling with cost of living pressures, or we take it from existing services.
Meanwhile, ICU nurse Kelly Hopkins says they're striking not just for pay, but for their patients.
Patients aren't safe, patients aren't getting the care. At the moment, there's two nurses on a ward that cannot deliver that care. We're going into hospital. I came into nursing to look after my patients, to hold their hands, to look after them, to wash them, to brush their teeth when they're unable to do that. And I can't do that at the moment because there's not enough staff on the ward.
Well, staying with strikes, ground baggage handlers at Heathrow Airport have announced strikes over Christmas will be going ahead, causing disruption for passengers going away over the new year. More than 400 staff members at the West London Airport will begin a 72-hour walkout from tomorrow morning. It's after staff rejected the latest pay offer from their employer Menzies, having called for a 13% pay rise. A further 72-hour strike at Terminals 2, 3 and 4 will follow, running from the 29th of December to the morning of New Year's Day. Meghan Markle has revealed how she thought about taking her own life in the final episodes of a docu-series released today on Netflix. In one of them, she says she thought to herself, all of this will stop if I'm not here. Prince Harry, meanwhile, blames the media for his wife's miscarriage, and he speaks about the breakdown of his relationship with his brother. He recalls it being terrifying to have Prince William shout at him and his father say things he claims that weren't true. The palace hasn't yet commented on the series.
I would far rather get destroyed in the press than play along with this game or this business of trading. And to see my brother's office copy the very same thing that we promised the two of us would never ever do, that was heartbreaking.
Authorities are continuing their search for 4 migrants believed to be missing after a boat partially deflated in the English Channel. 4 people have died when a boat with 47 on board capsized off the Kent coast yesterday morning. British authorities and lifeboat services, as well as the French Navy, were all involved in the rescue operation. The Prime Minister told MPs there'd been a tragic loss of human life. The Bank of England is expected to raise interest rates again as the cost of living continues to soar. The benchmark rate stands at 3%, with economists predicting it could go up to 3.5%. The latest meeting of the Monetary Policy Committee today will mark the 9th consecutive hike since last December, with the rate already at its highest level for 14 years. Thousands of people in Shetland are facing a 4th day without power as snow and freezing temperatures continue to grip the UK. Almost 2,500 homes are still without electricity as heavy snow fell on cables earlier this week. More than 120 extra engineers have been drafted in to help reconnect. They're warning it's likely to be the end of the week before power is restored to all properties. Some security rules on carrying liquids and items such as laptops in airport hand luggage are to ease.
The government set a deadline of June 2024 for major UK airports to install new security technology. It'll allow passengers to carry up to 2 litres of liquid in their hand luggage, up from the current 100 mils. And there'll be no need to remove electrical items from bags at security. And it's understood 3-time Wimbledon champion Boris Becker has been freed from jail today and will be deported from the UK. The 55-year-old German tennis star has been in prison for 8 months after being found guilty of bankruptcy. He was convicted in April of hiding £2.5 million worth of assets and loans to avoid paying his debts. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Beth.
Thank you, Rhiannon. It's 11:07. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. In this hour, nurses in England, Wales and Northern Ireland will stage walkouts this morning in the largest strike action in NHS history. I'm going to be joined by a former nurse who dedicated a lifetime of service to the NHS. What does she think? Another royal bombshell. The second part of Harry and Meghan's Netflix series came out earlier this morning. Our royal reporter Cameron Walker is live from the GB News Royal Reaction Room with a host of gripped royal guests. And I'm going to be joined by my fantastically smart and opinionated guests in about 30 minutes with a look at the day's biggest stories, including the dangers of social media. And of course, you have not disappointed this morning. We've got a Twitter poll. You've sent some brilliant messages and I'm going to read them in just a moment. But our Twitter poll is about the strikes. Do you support the nurses' strike? 73% of you do not support them, you hard-hearted lot. Cast your vote now. Please do email me as well, gbviews@gbnews.uk, to let me know your thoughts on anything else that we're discussing. Just a quick couple of your views. Gareth is talking about the COVID jabs and the care homes and that legal case. The COVID jabs were not fully tested and still not fully tested, says Gareth. So these care home workers who rightly refused the untested COVID jab were unfairly dismissed. Marcia has said they're only trying to tell their truth. Put yourselves in their shoes and show some empathy. You are not judge and jury. We are. That's the whole point. If they're going to do a series like that, we become the judge and jury. And putting myself in their shoes doesn't look like such a bad life. OK, now nurses across England, Wales and Northern Ireland have gone on strike this morning after talks with the government ended in deadlock, with thousands of patients expecting disruption to operations and appointments. What's the next step that the government takes to prevent a further strike action? Well, joining me now is former community nursing sister and community nurse manager, Rosemary Wyatt, also viewer of GB News too. So good morning, Rosemary. Thank you for joining me. Can I ask you, first of all, when did you leave the profession? How long ago? And did you ever imagine a time when nurses might be striking?
Good morning. I left the profession in 2010. I retired and I've been working since 1969, I guess, off and on with a couple of kids in between. No, I never really imagined that nurse would go on strike. No, I didn't. It was always...
Oh, I think we've lost Rosemary. Oh, what a shame. I was going to ask her, therefore, whether she agreed with David Starkey's point about the fact that the Royal College of Nurses are meant to always put somebody else in front of themselves. I think she's back. Rosemary, are you back with us? Welcome to the joys of live TV, Rosemary. We can't hear you now. Just 1 second, my love. Hang on. Right. Oh, I think we've lost her. Let's see if we can get Rosemary back. That's such a shame. Let me go to some of your views of what you've been saying this morning. OK, we're going to go to Alice Porter instead. Let's cross over now to our London reporter, Alice Porter, who is at St Thomas's Hospital with some nurses, existing nurses. Hello, Alice. How are you? What's the mood like down there today? Are the crowd getting a lot of support from passing drivers? That's always quite telling.
Yes, there absolutely is. As you can hear, for those who are watching, people just keep coming past on this bridge and beeping at the nurses, which is then responded with a cheer from the nurses who are striking here. And it suggests, I guess, from the people driving past, there is public support for the nurses. The question is, will that public support remain when we've got today 70,000 cancelled procedures and operations? So of course that's going to have an impact on care around the country. Now, the Royal College of Nursing say that life-preserving treatment will go ahead and urgent and critical care will still happen. But of course, there's a lot of discussion and debate about what constitutes urgent care. And that's a lot of discussions that people are having at the moment. And from my understanding, that actual individual cases are going to be considered between the nurses, between the nursing union and trust to see whether they'll be going ahead. And of course, this is very much an ongoing debate and concern over nurses' pay. The government say what they're requesting, a 19% pay rise, is just simply not affordable, that it would amount to 10 billion. But the nurses are saying, well, this is more than a rise with inflation, and have criticised the independent pay review which was done earlier this year into nurses' pay that the government have taken on, which was to give nurses a pay rise of £1,400. But that crucially was done in February, when it was a very different economic climate, when inflation was nowhere near as high as it is now. So many of them have criticised that and say that £1,400 simply is not enough in this economic climate, and that's why they're asking for a pay rise of 19%, which many will say is far too much.
OK, thank you, Alice Porter, down there in London. Alice, have you got to speak to many of the nurses there this morning? Do they... What is the mood like? Is this they look quite buoyant and quite jovial down there, but I know that when you speak to them, they're quite reluctant to be taking this action. They feel like this is the last straw, don't they?
They really do. I think a lot of people I've spoken to on the picket line have said to me that they just keep saying, we're so sorry we've had to do this. And I think that is something we have to really re-emphasise. This is the first time for the whole of the UK that the NHS nurses have gone on strike. They have before, specifically in Northern Ireland, but not for the whole of the NHS. And I think that is something that many of them feel incredibly sorry about. But a lot of them have just said to me, we have no choice. Some of them, I mean, particularly, look, we're here in London. This is such an expensive city. I mean, I can only imagine how difficult it is paying for the cost of commuting into a hospital when you're on, say, £27,000. I know I wouldn't want to be doing it. So I think that's the difficulty for a lot of the nurses who are struggling, particularly in somewhere, an area of London financially. They feel they're forced into it. And then it becomes also a difficult situation where so many nurses, as the guest you were just speaking to before she sadly cut out, are leaving the profession. That's been exacerbated because of the pandemic. And therefore, a lot of the nurses are saying it's not safe because of the low staffing levels, but then it becomes something of a chicken and egg situation, that because there are fewer staff, the ones who are still here do feel unsafe staying in the NHS.
OK, thank you, Alice. Alice Porter there. And talking of our former nurse that we lost there due to technical issues, I believe Rosemary is back with us. Rosemary Wyatt. Hello, Rosemary. Thank you for sticking around. Now, you might have heard what Alice was saying there about the nurses. They feel that they have no option. They feel that they've come to the end of the road. But is this appropriate action for nurses to be taking, who are meant to be doing a job which involves a huge amount of selflessness?
No, not really. I believe everything that Professor Starkey said. Actually, he was spot on. We trained as nurses. It was a vocation. You would never have dreamt of leaving your patient's bedside, not for anything. We've gone through strikes. We've gone through all sorts of things, but never would you actually renege on your patient. I do believe that nurses do need recognition. They need a huge amount of more recognition, not just about their money, but also about their conditions of work and patient safety, which I believe your other speaker mentioned. Patient safety is paramount, and it's not always dealt with appropriately.
Rosemary, there are about 39,000 vacancies for nurses in the NHS at the moment, 40,000 left in the past year. Full-time nurses, midwives did increase, though, by 32,000 between August 2019 and August 2022. How do we get more people to want to be nurses?
Well, I would never recommend anybody to do nursing now because there are much easier ways of making money. Nursing is a particular vocation, and I think the country needs to recognise that the nursing profession has a lot to give and a lot to offer and a lot more that it could do that it doesn't do now. I think that nursing is a very hard profession to do.
Yeah. But it was always hard, wasn't it? So I wonder what's changed. What's happened to graduates coming through, younger people at school? Why don't they want to be nurses now? Somehow it's not an attractive career a lot of the time.
No. I think when I started nursing in '69, nursing was, everybody adored nurses. We worked very, very hard. We were always short-staffed. We were always... we were absolutely exhausted, but we were so appreciated. It was amazing, and you did it because you loved it. But the pay was terrible. You didn't go into nursing for the pay. Now the problem now is that I can't really pinpoint what the problem is now. The training of nurses is completely different to what it used to be. Completely different. Now they go to university and get a degree. And I don't know whether that's the right thing or the wrong thing to do. I think that the way that we trained, the way that I trained on the job like an apprentice, was actually a fantastic way to learn the job.
I think so. And the problem, of course, Rosemary, is that lots of nurses now come out of that degree with a huge amount of debt because they're having to pay as well for their own training, and then they need more money to pay it back. So I can't help but think that this all started to go wrong when nurses had to be graduates. But Rosemary Wyatt, thank you ever so much for joining us, and thank you for being part of our GB News family and one of our regular viewers too. Now, send me your emails, won't you? gbviews@gbnews.uk. We've got this poll up asking whether you support the nurses' strike. Cast your vote now. After the break, I'm going to be back with my guests in just a moment to discuss the top stories of the day, including this really awful story about the killer, Jordan McSweeney. He had an unbelievable sheet of offences before he killed poor Zara Alina, and we're going to be discussing that case after this quick break.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Good morning, welcome back. It's 11:21 on Thursday. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. Joanna Williams is back with me, author and academic and historian David Starkey. Right, Joanna, sometimes these stories come along which are so brutal and so distressing and raise awareness of so many ways in which the justice process has not worked to keep somebody inside. This is Zara Alina, who lost her life at the hands of Jordan McSweeney, and he was jailed yesterday for 38 years.
Thank goodness. I mean, I rarely say this, but in this instance, I really do hope they just throw away the key and forget about him. I mean, it seems like the most brutal, vicious, sexually motivated crime. I mean, truly, truly horrific. But it's almost as if a crime wasn't bad enough, the details around the actual process of convicting him and what's gone on here just seem to really almost make it worse. So the fact is he had been in prison, he'd just been released, I think it was 9 days earlier, and I'm not completely sure whether there was a mistake in releasing him or new information had come to light, and he'd actually been recalled to prison 2 days before he convicted this horrific attack on Zara Alina. So he shouldn't have been free. Yeah. He should not have been walking the streets at the time he committed this attack. So that's the first thing that I think is really appalling. Clearly something went very, very badly wrong there, and there needs to be a proper investigation into why that was allowed to happen. But then the second thing that really shocks me about this case is with the actual sentencing of him and the actual court process. He refused to appear in court. Now, I read another case earlier this year, and it was, again, a really horrible story of a child that had been killed, and the mother refused to appear in court. I actually think this shouldn't be allowed. If people have committed these horrendous crimes, they should have to appear in court and face up to what they've done. So the defending prosecutor told the court McSweeney knew CCTV footage would be played at the sentencing hearing, and he did not want to relive the incident. Now that really turns my stomach, because poor Zara Alina and her family, they didn't have that choice of saying, we don't want to relive the incident. He did this. He should have to face up to responsibility, take responsibility for the horrific crime he committed.
What do you think, David? Imagine being the parents in that courtroom and knowing that they are sitting there and he has the luxury of sitting in a prison cell and not having to...
I agree with every single word that Joe said. But I think there's something else, which is this man's background.
Yeah.
There's been another statistic this week, which we should all note, that apparently now most children are not brought up by two parents.
Most children?
Apparently we are now at the point at which, I may be wrong, but we're at the tipping point, in other words, in which marriage, the conventional view of the family, becomes actually minority. And if you, of course, no one's saying every single person, parent, family leads to consequences like this. But if you read this man's background, brought up by a crackhead mother, his first memory of his father, whom he hardly saw, trying to murder his mother in the bath.
Yeah.
This is somebody who's completely outside all the ordinary processes of socialisation, of the development of moral values, of everything. All this man has ever known is violence.
Yeah,
is getting his way by violence, and presumably with a history of profound sexual frustration. Here is a beautiful, attractive woman who's got you get the feeling she's got everything I don't have. I ate her.
Damaged individual, no doubt.
But sorry, I am not trying to extenuate.
No, I'm sure.
I mean, absolutely the opposite. I mean, I would have liked to have seen him in the dock between two very burly policemen who would have made absolutely sure, A, that he watched that video, and B, that he respected the judge when the sentence was administered. The trouble is, our legal system has now become suffused with touchy-feely. Listen to the language that he used. He didn't wish to It's like Meghan.
Yeah.
He didn't wish to relive. The criminals have learned this bogus language. And again, he's been in jail. The massive failure of imprisonment to have any impact on the behaviour of most prisoners. Most prisoners do go on to re-offend.
Yeah.
In other words, the only possible use of jail is to keep people, as it were, as you said, throw away the keys, keep them away from the rest of society as long as possible. But that is monstrously expensive. And there's an entire process of touchy-feely, round tree trusts and whatever, working in the opposite direction. So it's yet another area where everything is confused.
It is.
We are not clear about what values we're trying to inculcate. The notions of personal freedom are offered to people who not only can't take advantage of it, but directly abuse it. It's a testimony, frankly, to the mess we've got ourselves in area after area.
Very much a failed system in terms of this murderer. He was seriously neglected as a young child, deprived of the love of either parent. He didn't come into the social services care until he was 16 years old, moved into care. Awful, awful, awful backstory. But just to be clear, we're not making any sort of excuses, and our hearts go out to the family of Zara Alina, because it is a terrible, terrible, tragic event. OK, Peter Hitchens, never known to disappoint when it comes to writing a comment piece. He has been
never known to look on the bright side, I think is what you should say, yes. Mr. Gloom.
But there's something about the current culture we're in at the moment, and you touched upon it a little bit there, really, David, which Peter says that Britain is slowly turning into a version of the mad old East Germany with equality and diversity, the new Marxism. Even worse, it's happening under the Tories. What do you make of his opinion, Joe?
Well, I actually think there's an awful lot of truth in what he says, and in more ways than one as well. I mean, he's reaching mainly for the kind of amounts of propaganda and indoctrination we're getting. I mean, we'd call it woke. Clearly, that wasn't the word that was used in East Germany. But I think another thing is the fact that nothing works in this country anymore. You try and get anywhere on a train, you try and get an appointment with the doctor. I mean, so many of the
Your
things
bitter experience of this morning.
Talking about already today, you just feel like, sadly, that we are living in a bit of a dysfunctional society. You want to try and do anything, post a letter, not going to happen, go somewhere, not going to happen. Just everything seems to be
But it's only the public sector. What is striking is how, for example, let's just cast our minds back to COVID. Do you remember? We were told we must, because it's a really useful test case, and it's responsible for much of what's gone wrong. Right at the beginning of it, there was threats. Oh, there's going to be a food shortage. People then pop up in minor universities holding distinguished titles in very minor universities saying, we've got to have food rationing. Can you imagine if we'd had food rationing? We would have all starved. And instead, the supermarkets, with hesitation over bags of sugar and toilet rolls. I've no idea why people buy bags of sugar.
I've no idea.
And especially why they buy them together, but that's unthinkable. But let's now be really serious. And I think that the real resemblance to East Germany or to the Soviet Union is we've become a society based on lies, in which we are sold and peddled public lies. The biggest lie at the moment is the decision which is being taken by the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England today about the rising interest rates. The bank lies and says that quantitative easing was not responsible for inflation. The money supply was at times virtually doubled.
Yeah.
We have got debts on the same scale as the Second World War, and thanks to furlough, it was pushed straight into people's pockets when they couldn't spend it on anything. So, lie number one. Lie number two, the National Health Service is the best in the world. It is good at only one thing, which is treating everybody equally badly.
Yeah.
In terms of every other outcome, every disease, every chronic disease, we score staggeringly badly in terms of our European competitors.
You're right.
Just lie after lie after lie.
And you know what? And I come on this show, and since I've started this show just a few weeks ago, every day I think we can big up Great Britain today. And there's nothing. I try every day to find something.
But you see, I think there are many
celebrate,
things.
and I'm struggling.
Well,
David, help me.
Well, I think actually there are huge numbers of things. I think that our science is wonderful. I think there are vast edges of our industry which we forget. You know, the quality of our aerospace, of our biotechnical industry, the calibre of the performing arts is wonderful.
The problem is, David, a lot of those things we're just kind of not allowed to celebrate because particularly the scientific breakthroughs, and I agree, there have been some phenomenal breakthroughs even just this week with nuclear fission and breakthroughs in
that was in America.
Treatment.
Can I gently say that was in America?
Yes, well, there you go.
But actually, now come on, Bev. Now you're knocking because do you know what everybody said? The American breakthrough is one that will take an immense amount of time actually to translate into real power. We are ahead in nuclear fusion, but we've been trying it since the 1950s. It's not easy. It's not easy.
The point I wanted to make was that sometimes we're not allowed to celebrate these things because they become associated with white men. And the point Hitchens
Never
is
stop
making
me, dear.
in his article today is that we've got 10,000 people in this country who are all employed specifically in equality, diversity and inclusivity roles.
It is
in other words, doing absolutely nothing apart from pointing out.
No, they are the
We
right.
can't celebrate this.
We've got to stop talking again. Right, time for another quick break. We're going to have Cameron Walker is going to be in our little viewing studio, in our little cinema that we've got with live reaction on the Harry and Meghan Netflix drama. That's after your morning's news.
Good morning, it's 11:32. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Tens of thousands of nurses across parts of the UK are taking part in the biggest strike in NHS history. Picket lines have been set up in England, Wales and Northern Ireland in the first of two 12-hour strikes over pay. Staff will continue to provide some urgent care, but routine surgery and other planned treatment will be disrupted. Members of the Royal College of Nursing are asking for a 19% pay rise, a demand the government says is unaffordable. Well, in the last few minutes, the GMB union Scotland has announced its members have rejected their latest pay offer. Authorities are continuing their search for 4 migrants believed to be missing after a boat partially deflated in the English Channel. 4 others died when a boat with 47 on board capsized off the Kent coast yesterday morning. British authorities and lifeboat services, as well as the French Navy, were all involved in the rescue operation. Ground baggage handlers at Heathrow Airport have announced strikes over Christmas will be going ahead, causing disruption for passengers during the festive period. More than 400 staff members at the West London Airport will begin a 72-hour walkout from tomorrow morning. It's after they rejected the latest pay offer from their employer, Menzies, having called for a 13% pay rise. A further 72-hour strike at Terminals 2, 3 and 4 will follow, running from the 29th of December to the morning of New Year's Day. Meghan Markle has revealed how she thought about taking her own life in the final episodes of the couple's docu-series released today on Netflix. Prince Harry, meanwhile, blames the media for his wife's miscarriage and speaks about the breakdown of his relationship with his brother, Prince William. The palace hasn't yet commented on the series. And it's understood 3-time Wimbledon champion Boris Becker has been freed from jail today and will be deported from the UK. The 55-year-old German tennis star served just 8 months of a 2.5-year sentence for bankruptcy offences. He was convicted in April of hiding £2.5 million worth of assets and loans to avoid paying his debt. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2324 and €1.1616. The price of gold is £1,443.20 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 sits 7,465 points.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Very dramatic, isn't it? Now, this is Bev Turner today on GB News. OK, I've got to buy into, I've got to be serious about this Netflix series. Stop laughing, David Starkey. The Sussexes gave us their first 3 episodes last week, and they've got their other 3 out today, this Netflix documentary. It's all unravelling, isn't it? I mean, all the websites are kind of filleting little snippets from the series to tell us what they're saying, and we're all going to take it as we find it. So let's speak to Cameron Walker. He knows a lot more than I do, as you can tell. Cameron, how's it going? Is it gripping? Is it revelatory? Is it going to bring down the royal family?
Bev, it's certainly 2 of those things. I'm not sure about the third one you mentioned, but it is, let's be frank, a lot more explosive than the first 3 episodes we saw last week. Now, I'm joined by entertainment correspondent Rebecca Toomey in GB News' Royal Reaction Room, this very suave cinema we've got going on here. Rebecca, thank you for joining me. First of all, what's your overall impression, having now seen all of the episodes?
I have actually changed my opinion of Meghan, and I did actually last week when I saw the second and third episode. And what I'm seeing is that initially I'm seeing the Meghan that we first fell in love with, I think, as British people. We first liked the fact that she was something fresh and new and wanted to make a change. She's very honest and she likes to break the rules and break protocol. And I think in this latest volume 2 of the documentary, we're seeing a Meghan that actually is quite empowered and quite strong. And I don't find there is whiny and moany in this part, which is what was annoying me before.
So, I mean, you look at the YouGov poll, Harry and Meghan are still very much towards the bottom of that in terms of popularity of the royal family. I believe you said yourself in the past that there was a period where, like quite a lot of people, I think, perhaps in this country, they were more in favour of other members of the royal family due to what Harry and Meghan were doing, i.e., you know, blindsiding the Queen, as some people put it. Of course, Harry has denied that in this documentary. What do you think's changed?
I think the British public were very hurt by what was happening, and the Oprah interview didn't really sit very well with Brits. I think we were quite offended that it felt like they just upped and left. They blindsided the Queen, which they've denied, but that's what we were being told, that's what we were interpreting things as. And we never really got to see the emotional toll. But I think what's really interesting in this documentary is we know a lot of what's happened, but the commentary around the misogyny and the racism against Meghan, that's really opened my eyes a little bit more. And I think I should have been more aware, and all of us should have been more aware about the sort of ripple effect of all of this.
Well, there was no denying that there were very critical headlines of both Harry and Meghan actually talks about a very serious situation which happened to her, and Harry does as well. And it's about Meghan's miscarriage very soon after they moved into their house in California. So let's take a look at what Prince Harry said about that.
I believe my wife suffered a miscarriage because of what the Mail did. That I watched the whole thing. Now, do we absolutely know that the miscarriage was caused by that? Of course we don't. But bearing in mind the stress that caused, the lack of sleep, and the timing of the pregnancy, how many weeks in she was, I can say from what I saw, that miscarriage was created by what they were trying to do to her.
Well, a very serious allegation there. The Mail has not responded to that particular claim yet. Rebecca, very quickly, your thoughts on that?
I think it's tragic to see what she went through, and you can see the anger that they want to blame someone. I think the problem here in this whole documentary is that Meghan and Harry have a lot of anger, but they don't know where to point. Is it the press? Is it the trolls? Is it the institution of the royals? Is it their personal relationships with their family? And I think that's the problem here.
Rebecca, thank you very much. Well, Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace have not responded to any of the claims made in this Netflix documentary. Bev, I'm in this royal reaction room all day bringing you the latest analysis, so stay tuned.
OK, thank you, Cameron. I can tell you, as somebody that worked with pregnant women, I ran antenatal classes for 10 years. I wrote a book called The Happy Birth Book. We never know what causes miscarriages, and I think that is deeply dubious accusation to make against a newspaper. It was frankly ludicrous to suggest that that could be the reason. Anyway, I'll be watching it over the weekend, will you? Now, 4 people, of course, died yesterday tragically after a migrant boat capsized in the English Channel. It is being described as the worst tragedy in the Strait for over a year. It definitely is that. Let's go to our home and security editor, Mark White, for an update from Dover. Good morning, Mark. What is the latest now? I believe there was some audio has been released of an emergency message that was sent from the boat.
Well, we know that the boat did indeed call up the rescue services at Coast Guard HQ to tell them about the unfolding tragedy that they were having to deal with, and to call for rescue help to arrive on scene about 8 miles off the Kent coast. That did of course happen with both Border Force, the lifeboats, the Royal Navy, French counterparts all descending on the scene, but not before 31 of those who were on board managed to get on board a local scallop fishing boat which was in the area, luckily, and was able to pull the majority of those that were in the water onto that boat, or the consequences that we're talking about today could have been far worse. The rest were picked up by the rescue services, and we know, of course, that 4 people lost their lives. We understand that at least another 4 people are still in the channel missing. No hope, of course, of finding them alive after being in the freezing waters of the English Channel for so long. But that search operation is continuing. It's a low-key search operation because tide and current will have pulled anybody that was in that area well out of that initial search area by now. The Marine Accident Investigation Branch has also said that it is now carrying out a preliminary investigation with a view to gathering some initial evidence before perhaps launching a full investigation once the facts become known.
OK, thank you, Mark. Mark White there down in Dover. Can I get your thoughts, reflect on this a little bit? My panel, Joanna Williams and David Starkey, are still here. Joanna, to some extent, it's a miracle this hasn't happened sooner this year, given that we've got 45,000 people who've made this journey in this way.
No, absolutely. It's tragic, but it's not at all surprising. You're absolutely right. The shocking thing is that this is not happening more often. Obviously, we're heading into winter. The weather's turning. I mean, this is just terrible. You know, one thing that really kind of gets me, though, that I think is quite an important point to make here, is that lots of people, including the Labour Party, Labour politicians standing up in Parliament yesterday, Yvette Cooper, blaming people smugglers for this. And obviously, the people smugglers are taking a profit from this trade in potentially people dying, and that's horrific, and they must be stopped. I mean, they absolutely must be stopped from carrying out this trade in human life. But I actually think there's another layer of people who I would blame here as well, and that's the lawyers and the campaigners who actually send a message to migrants that if you can do it, if you can get over the channel, we will do everything we can to keep you here, to let you stay, and to make sure that you have a reasonable life. And I actually think that is just as bad. I think they have blood on their hands, and I know that's a really, really strong thing to say, but I absolutely feel that that's the case. You know, every time they send out that message, they encourage another person to think it's worth taking that risk to get in a boat and to come across the channel in this way. So yes, we need to stop the people smugglers, but I also think we need to stop the lawyers and the campaigners who are sending this message out to vulnerable, desperate people in some cases.
David, thanks, Jo. What do you think?
I think Jo has put her finger on one absolutely fundamental problem. But you see, I think it actually goes deeper. We were talking when we had our Peter Hitchens discussion about things not working. We were an island. We were a society that prided itself on being free and on having minimum rules. We don't have to carry identity cards. We have a non-contributory welfare system. Now, as a result, largely of what the Blair government did, the enormous floods of immigration on the one hand, and the extraordinarily increased diversity. Now, that is not necessarily a bad thing, but it certainly isn't necessarily a good thing either. It means that the relatively secure, maybe stodgy, homogenous society that didn't need identity cards, that could rely on the fact that people did work when they could work in order to draw benefits. Our world isn't like that anymore. But we haven't changed the rules. I mean, Britain, it's not simply the lawyers that make Britain a target. The fact that you immediately get welfare. The fact, and look at the way that, for example, immigrants from Albania are dealt with in France and Germany. I think there's 100% refusal of their claims for asylum, and they are sent back.
We had,
in other words, we are, as ever, falling between stools, between the old homogenous, trust Britain, it's all really to do with gentlemanly agreement and whatever, and this extraordinarily diverse, turbulent society with different values, many people without values, but we've refused to change the rules.
And maybe, I suppose, your point might be that happened so quickly.
We haven't caught up with ourselves.
We haven't caught up with ourselves.
We haven't caught up with ourselves. And you see, I think, I'm shocked in many ways hearing myself talk. Yeah. I was a passionate libertarian. I was profoundly proud of the fact that we didn't need identity cards, that you didn't need to define yourself by saying, the state recognises me. I was a free-born Englishman, I had the right. I think those days are over.
I think that makes my heart sink, David.
But I think we have to acknowledge the truth. I mean,
there is an
one of the things I tried to be doing on this channel is to say, let us try and face truth. We were talking before about lies. And if we do not face the truths about ourselves, we'll never actually be able to do anything.
There is an argument that there are so many people now that we need to be organised better. That's kind of what ID cards, right?
Yes,
but I do not want to be beholden to this everywhere I go, because it will no longer be a piece of paper in your pocket. Your digital ID will be tied to this, and we'll be able to go nowhere without that.
No, I agree. And I think it's important to face truths, and society is changing. And certainly we're getting far more people crossing the channel in boats. I mean, 10 years ago, this was not even 10 years ago, 3 years ago.
Was unheard
this
of.
was unheard of.
Yeah.
So we've got this massive change. But, David, I don't think I'm with Bev. You know, my heart sinks at the prospect of identity cards. I think we face the truth, but we also have choices. So Rishi
But the
Sunak
choice will inevitably... Sorry,
but let me just tell you what I think the choice is.
Yes.
So Rishi Sunak this week announced that he's going to employ 1,000 people more to work on processing these applications. I think you need one person. You need one person to make a law which says if you come from Albania, you do not have an automatic right to asylum in this country, whereas instead we're going to introduce these new bureaucratic processes, employ more people, more money, more paperwork, more opportunities for lawyers to get their fingers on what's going on. One person make a law.
But the trouble is, your proposed law flies in the face of the Convention on Refugees. It flies in the face of systematic judgments from
Other countries manage it, though, David. Sweden's able to say if you're from Albania, you don't have a right to asylum. Sweden is able to say if you don't have a right to asylum, if you're from Albania, you do not have an automatic right to asylum. Why can Sweden do it, but we can't?
Were you not telling us little stories about lawyers?
Because they are at the back of all of this,
we have, as always, we have gold-plated human rights laws, as we tended to do.
We were talking about propaganda work with Peter Hitchens, and I can't help but feel that they could have done something. Like you said, they could have, though if the will was there, they could have done
There isn't the will. The Commons, in fact, received a bill that would have done more or less that yesterday.
But what if the will? What if the lack of will, David, is so that we are all on an ID system? What if the lack of will is so that people like you, with your incredible intellect and your knowledge of history, turn around and say the time has come that we need a digital identification system to stop these people coming over in boats? Because then we are all going to suffer because of that.
Well, I'm afraid that is the reward of a diverse society. I'm sorry that you cannot have the society that's based on trust, the society that's based on the fact we're all basically the same and have the same values, when we don't have the same values, when we have porous frontiers. I'm sorry, you know, we are half of the time we spend our time saying, oh, isn't it wonderful in the new world, the boring world of the 1950s, you know, all vanilla flavoured and pineapple chunks, isn't it marvellous it's gone? And then we suddenly realise what we need to do to control the new world, and we're not willing to do it. So we're perpetually...
But I'm glad we're not willing to do it.
We're falling between
we are.
Okay, well, then you want to embrace the chaos.
No, I think there are other options. I don't think it's as binary as you're making out. I don't think the choices are either chaos or identity cards. I think
slavery and being a slave to our digital ID system, which may well be pushed through under the auspices of an immigration crisis, will affect all of us in ways that we can barely imagine.
It will, like it will help to stop the vast levels of welfare fraud. We have enormous levels of welfare fraud. Exactly for all the reasons.
I don't think it will. I think it will. I think those people will always. I think when it comes to fraud, people will always find a way.
That is not true. One of the reasons why countries like France are so unattractive to immigrants is precisely because the rigour of the laws of identity. Now, look, just one second. We all have to go through. I'm in the middle of buying and selling a house at the moment. The antics you have to go through to prove that you're not a money launderer. We're all having to do this. And I think we've got to recognise that something has changed. We have not caught up with it. And we are willing one sort of society, and we have the laws and traditions of another sort of society. And
I want this vision of a new society.
But you see, the evidence is absolutely on my side. You were talking about the chaos everywhere you look. One of the reasons is we refuse to recognise the extent of change that's happened.
I've got to bring our poll results. We were asking on today's show whether you were in support of the nurses striking. Well, over 70% of you do not support The strike. Richard has said all the strikes are simply jumping on the opportunity to demand a pay rise at a time of peak inflation. In a few months' time, inflation is positive 5%. The window of opportunity will have gone. I'm not sure inflation will be that. Thank you, Joanna Williams. Thank you, David Starkey. I barely stopped for breath. I don't think any of us did we?
You weren't able to get a word in edgeways, were you?
It's marvellous. You made my job very easy today. Right, I'll be back on Monday. I hope you have a lovely weekend, whatever you're doing, running around, getting shopping for Christmas. I've not even started yet. But do stay safe out there in the ice. Mark Longhurst is next. I'm Bev Turner. I'll see you Monday morning.
Hello, this is Annie Shuttleworth with your latest weather forecast from the Met Office. Now, the rest of the week will remain very cold with continued risk of severe frost. So by the weekend, there are signs of change. But through Thursday and Friday, we'll just start to see our weather coming in from the northwest as opposed to the north and east that we've seen over the past few days. Now, through the rest of Thursday, we'll see snow showers pushing in on that northerly breeze across northern areas of Scotland, as well as northeastern parts of England and parts of Northern Ireland. So some snow showers continuing here. Away from these coastal areas, it will be a clear and sunny day, though temperatures still very cold for the time of year, but not too bad in any sheltered sunshine in the southwest of England. Overnight, temperatures will plummet once again. It could be the coldest night of the year so far. Rurally down as low as -13 in the south and perhaps as low as -15 across northern parts of Scotland. There'll be some mist and fog around in the southeast, so some freezing fog here even. And across the northwest, we'll start to see the next band of snow push into the Western Isles and parts of the Highland. There's another warning in force for snow and ice through a lot of Friday here. We could see accumulations to low and high levels. Elsewhere, though, on Friday, it's going to be another bright and sunny day. A few showers now coming into southwestern parts of Wales and southwestern England, though it will be another very cold day, especially across southeastern areas of England. And through Friday night, another cold night. Colder in the southeast, where we won't see as much of that mist or fog developing. A little bit more cloud across northwestern areas, keeping temperatures up a little bit.